Apologies from Cape Maynard this morning, so welcome Leanne, good to see you. Steve Ward and David Wilkinson. We got Lynn here, Lynn Hadwin. Can't see you, Lynn, but if you're there, welcome.
I'm here, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. And on item 62 on your agenda, just to tell you quickly, the new hospital programmes, obviously in Kate's absence, Aaron will present on that. And there'll be a couple of changes on the private board, but I'll come to that when we get to the private board. So if we start off then, I've just got the apologies that I've got. Phil, have I seen Phil Wood? Did I see Phil before?
Yeah, I'm here, Mike.
Brilliant, great, welcome, Phil. Any other apologies that you're aware of, Paul?
No, Mike, but there's an amendment to the declarations of conflicts of interest. Jill sent us a formal notification that she's resigned as a director of the University of Cumbria. We're noting that on our records and we'll amend the register for the next meeting of the Board of Directors.
Brilliant, thanks. Okay, then minutes of the Board of the Directors meeting held on the 26th of May. Somebody want to move that's a correct record? Yeah. Great, thank you. I can see most of you on the screen, but I'll do what I always do in the meeting if that's okay. I know some of you have got some problems with your Wi-Fi's as well. Aaron, if I can look to you, if I miss any hands up, can you just jig me along, please?
I'm happy to be your hand sweeper as always, Chair. Yes, I shall fulfil that role.
Thank you very much. So we approve the minutes. So then we move to the action sheets. Paul, anything that you want to bring to our attention there?
No, there's a number of items from the most recent meetings which you can see are scheduled. Again, we're trying to work our way through some of the longer standing issues, and you'll note that the Kirkup 5-year review report is on the agenda for today.
Okay, thank you. And then item 56, Chair's report. You can see, as always, I do this every month. You've got the report in front of you. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think the only things that I want to bring out is we're very slowly moving towards a loosening of the lockdowns. So there'll be more and more face meetings occurring. Recovery and restoration obviously carrying on. I'll leave those and the transformation to the Chief Exec. And the Lancaster Health Festival, which is happening in the last few days of July and the first few days of August. We always play a part in that. If any of you want to get involved, please contact the office and we'll put you in touch with the organisers. And then my last point, I've ended it with to thank all colleagues during these difficult times. I suspect we'll have a difficult summer. So I'd like to thank all colleagues for the work done today and the work that's upcoming in the next 3 or 4 months as well. But that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions. Phil, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just a point on about the health festival, just in case I'll raise it now and let people know. There's a talk which is being held about the future of new hospitals, which I said I'd happily host and talk at, which is with the Quakers Association and another group of people. But there's a misrepresentation. I've asked it to be changed. The discussion is about the move of the RLI to Garstang and merging with Preston. So I've asked them to adjust that, but you know, conjecture and news reports don't equal fact. So Ian Dew is looking at that for us now, but I said I'd host that talk, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I've just had a small request coming up on when we get to item 58, panel review of Kirkup. Aaron will say a few words before we move to that item. But at the moment, we're on item 57. Aaron, as Chief Exec, your report, please.
Thanks, Chair. There's a lesson here, isn't there, in not following your boss. So I won't talk about the health festival or the thanks for stuff. But so I tend to start off framing these reports, brief updates for a few minutes on the kind of national, regional, and what we're up to as a trust and what I've been in amongst. But before I do that, just a small announcement for board colleagues. Many of you will know, but it's important that I note it here. So Andrea has announced her intention to retire last month. She's going to work a period of notice up until the end of September, and will be going out, obviously, currently for advert to, I want to say replace Andrea, but I don't think we can, to fulfil the role of Director of Governance when Andrea retires. We'll do something properly, Mike, closer to the time. But Andrea is a colleague that I don't think we will be able to find another one of. She is a highly gifted, very talented leader in that space, and has done an awful lot of work in the 2 years that we've had Andrea. So she has my personal thanks. I'm sure board colleagues will do the same in the future. It's a bit of a long notice period with retirement end of September, so plenty of time still for Andrea to show us all of her contributions, I think, particularly over this summer period. But it's just to let the board know. Okay, so just, I guess, a couple of minutes on that framing that I talk about, national, regional, local. From a national perspective, it's been quite a difficult period, I think, for the NHS. So we're obviously still working through recovery and restoration, accelerator programmes for some regions, of which we're part of, and a real focus now on next steps for the service. And by next steps, we're talking about financial recovery and performance recovery. But we've also got an element of system reform, and later on the agenda we've got the ICS and provider collaborative design framework brief update. So what's going to follow nationally now? Obviously, we've got the announcement of the new Secretary of State. There's going to be a process to recruit to the new Chief Executive of the NHS. And we know that with a change of leadership and some legislative change, we need to be really clear as an organisation on maintaining our priorities, the 3 that we've agreed, quality and safety of services, transformation and financial recovery, and making sure that colleagues' health and wellbeing are a priority. But we also need to put ourselves in a position through the summer and the autumn to really make sure we understand where we fit in this new system, we contribute to its design, and then we're really clear as an organisation as to what role we need to play. And that will feature as part of board agendas over the next few months as the national agenda gets clearer. I understand that for the appointments process into the ICS, there is a national appointments process to be followed for all chief executives in the ICS. And for chairs of ICS is similar process. But I understand for those chairs that have been through a process already, there is going to be a different approach to appointing those chairs. So we'll obviously keep board updated as those developments progress. Regionally at the ICS, obviously, there is a connection then to that national agenda. And in particular, the system reform work, where we've got the design oversight group that Jeff sits on. And we've also got the ICP development advisory group that I sit on, again with Jeff. Jeff's busy in the system reform agenda. And I'm really pleased with the way that's progressing. I think we need to find a little bit of space for the board in a workshop space, Chair, probably towards the end of the summer, just to bring together the ICS and the ICP work again. It's nothing that we're not all engaged in, but I think just finding a platform to really understand where the latter half of this year is going on that agenda would be helpful. So I'll work with you, Chair, to set that up with Paul. Other issues to highlight in the ICS, pace is becoming really different in our ICS. Focus on delivery is becoming really different positively. We've said the only measure of success for these changes is that things will happen for our services and our communities that wouldn't have happened if the integrated approach wasn't in place. So you'll see in the ICS newsletter that's been circulated, decision made now on the siting of the pathology hub at the Salisbury site, and we're just working through the remainder of the business case. It's £30 million capital investment, so we're up and running. We'll get the final proposals through, and that's now going to progress as we'd anticipate. I'm reticent to call them fragile services now, but the service development work that we've signed up to as a board under the provider collaborative for things like stroke and ophthalmology and vascular. We're going to talk later on this afternoon about the stroke case development, but both stroke and ophthalmology are now reaching decision points and really good support, and we'll connect with the board now around moving that service transformation from talking about it and understanding the issues to making some decisions that will lead to service change. So I'm really excited about the next month or so as we start to sort of build some of those developments into practical delivery. I'm really grateful for colleague support in pulling this together, particularly the clinical and operational team with Shahidul, Kate and Leanne contributing to those programmes of work. So that's a bit of around ICS. For UHMBT, I was having a catch up. I think Leanne's next door this morning, but with Leanne this morning. To say there's an awful lot on, I think would be an understatement. The amount of work that our organisation has prioritised and is delivering is substantial. It is all good stuff. It's all pointing at those 3 priorities. But if we think about recovery and restoration and the accelerator programme, if we think about service transformation and the work of financial recovery, if we think about the development of service integration with our ICP or ICS, we're thinking about our forthcoming CQC report, which is likely to have improvement actions in it that we'll need to prioritise and service. And we have our existing improvement programmes. There's a lot. And I just want to call out, staff who are still finding some time for some breaks, focusing on all those agendas and delivering really well. A massive, thank you from me, from the board, about the priorities that we continue to service. But I'm just going to flag, I'm going to be doing some work with the executive team and leadership teams through the summer about what the rest of the year looks like and whether we might need to shift some of our focus and priorities as a result, which we'll bring back to board if we think we need to change the shape of that a little. At the moment, we're servicing the things we need to service, but you can just see a winter, you can see the accelerator likely pushing out through, the latter half of this year. So I'm just recognising that we might want to regroup a little as an exec team and a board on the remainder of the year in terms of priorities and areas of focus. There's some other elements in my update that will feature on the agenda, so I won't cover those off, Chair. Only to recognise that we continue with 2 development areas of work. The anchor institution work that Phil's leading on, that's progressing well, and we've got some flags to bring back to board over the coming months on progress in that area. Phil's leadership in that space and with the ICP collaborative is superb. It's very, very good. Phil's found one of his niches, I think, and he's driving a lot of that work. It's good to see. And the purpose and vision value strategy work. We've done some early workshops now with the leadership team around purpose and vision. We're going to bring that into board to then talk about where we take the values and strategy piece. So again, all of the things that we said we'd commit to are in train. We'll bring those back. So I'll end on the same point that you finished on, Mike, which is a massive thank you for all our teams who continue to do really great work. Still encouraging people to do hands, face, space. We'll wait whatever the final gateway decisions are in July around, any restoration back to normal in terms of social restrictions. But that's where I'll end, Mike, just on a thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. Jeff has raised an issue in the chat space about ICS representation. I thought, well, lay and non-exec roles in the ICP and the ICS. Jeff, do you want to say a few words about that now? Because it seems appropriate to respond to Aaron's report now. You there, Jeff?
I think you might have frozen and got booted out, Mike.
All right. Then I'll bring Jeff later on in the agenda then. Any further questions for the Chief Exec on his report? And Bruce, you've got your hand up. Oh, Bruce.
Sorry, it's about Jeff's point about NEDs and lay members. I thought the system design document that came out last week talks about 3 members, NEDs being on the boards of the ICS NHS body, didn't in terms of a chair of audit, independent chair, and one other, didn't it?
You're on mute, Chair. I haven't there this morning.
My apologies. Yeah, that's for the ICS, so we've got that. But I'm not sure whether Jeff was going to talk about the ICP role as well. But I will bring Jeff in if he can get back into us. But yeah, the design documents come out for the ICS. Currently, there are 10 named board members, but of course you can have up to 35 in theory. I suspect the ICSs will go for around 18 to 22, but we'll see. And some will be allowed to wear 2 hats, I think. But again, we'll have to wait and see on that. Aaron, I don't know whether you've got any insight into that.
We've got a bit of time and space for a few minutes this afternoon to respond to that ICS PCB design framework. And I think one of the items we got on the agenda today around the new hospitals programme governance structures recognises additional NED lay member input into some of those programmes.
Yeah.
I think it probably sits in the space of the workshop I've suggested, because there aren't many of us either execs or non-execs really. And if it starts to expand to ICP, ICS and governance structures, we're going to have to consider how we might service that.
Yeah. Okay, so we can talk about it later if Jeff comes back. Oh, Jeff, you're here with your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. My IT crashed completely there. I don't know what happened. Just a few thoughts really about the roles of non-execs, lay members, governors in the new world. So obviously, the trust will continue as is, but I'm thinking more in terms of the ICP. And also, to some degree, the conversation around the ICS, because although there's guidance, it's not extensive guidance. So I think the guidance so far covers a lot of the sort of the stuff that needs to be done first. So I think the conversations about in this space are yet to happen, and that gives us an opportunity. So I'm really keen. I've had a conversation already in the CCG with our lay members about how they see the future. Just because I think that informs me when I'm in the role in the ICP development group and the ICS development group. So I think there's a space for the board to discuss it, but there's also probably a real useful time could be spent if bringing together the different members of the different organisations in the partnership. And I don't know what that means in local government terms, but I mean, obviously, it means something within Morecambe Bay UHMBT Trust. It means something for the retiring members of the CCG, and then there's Lancashire Care and South Cumbria Foundation Trust. So there's something about having a meeting at some point, just a sort of off the records conversation about what people's ambitions are, what needs to stay the same, and maybe different ways of working as well, because this is a new world we're going into with the partnership. So it's just a plea that I'm not the solution, just a plea that we can have those conversations over the coming months before we get tied down by legislation. Thanks.
Yeah, that's the point that Bruce raised as well. So if you're here this afternoon, Jeff, we'll give a few minutes to have a further discussion on that this afternoon. Okay, and then we will follow up your point earlier in your report as well, Aaron, on a summer meeting as well to cover those points. So if colleagues are happy and we accept the Chief Exec's report, we'll move on to item 58, which is the panel review of the Kirkup. I know the Executive Chief Nurse Sue will present, but Aaron, you want to say a few words first?
Yeah, just 30 seconds, Mike, as an intro. So firstly, I just want to recognise all the hard work that's gone in from lots of contributory partners to this report under Sue's leadership, and recognise the input of Joanne Morse and patient groups. We've had a lot of contribution to this review, and in terms of the audit work. I just want to recognise the context in which this report is being presented. It is a standalone report. It is looking at 5 years hence as a board, how would we reflect on how successful we've delivered against the Kirkup recommendations? Have they been sustained? What areas have we seen difficulty in maintaining? But it's not a report on the service today. We have other mechanisms by which we receive those reports through our divisional care group. That was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? The care group governance structures, our quality committee, the performance oversight that we have around service performance. And I also want to recognise that the environment around maternity services is changing. As a result of the Ockenden report, you will have seen the CQC's approach to reviewing maternity services. You'll have seen some of those headlines over the last few weeks. And I'm conscious that we have our own CQC report that we're receiving a draft around, and we'll have time to consider, factual accuracy and what we do about that. So it's really important we draw a distinction on the terms of reference and what this report is, and the context of maternity services in particular at the minute. And I think it's likely that we recognise that we've still got improvement work to do in that service. It still forms part of our enhanced support programmes, for example, and the CQC report also I would expect to see some improvement actions given where I guess the inspection approach has taken maternity over that. So just 30 seconds, Chair, as a bit of framing before Sue talks through the report.
Thank you. Good point made. Sue, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check? I can't see Joanne's name on here, but there is one other. Is that you, Joanne?
It is me. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Morning.
So Joanne's very kindly joined us in order to answer any questions, because I wasn't on the review panel, and if there's any particular questions at the end of the presentation, then it may be more appropriate for Joanne as chair of the panel to answer those. And I want to thank Joanne, because I know this is a really a difficult ask at a difficult time to chair the panel. So I've introduced Joanne. The original Kirkup report, if you remember, detailed a distressing chain of events at Furness, which were linked primarily to poor behaviours, poor training, failure to recognise, report and learn from poor care, denial that problems existed, series of missed opportunities to intervene both internally and externally, not listening to families, and it led to a number of avoidable harms to mothers and babies, including some tragic and unnecessary deaths. So I just wanted to kind of remind us about what Kirkup found. Staff worked really hard to deliver the recommendations. In 2016, we published a 1-year on report, and I think David Walker led on that. As board members will be aware, in 2020, the Trust commissioned a panel review to help understand whether the 18 Trust recommendations from the original 2015 Kirkup report continued to be sustained. Jill Stannard, our NED, was an observer on the panel. The report provides information about the panel, the methodology used, the findings. It narrates any recommendations made. Although it was an internal review of the 18 Trust recommendations, some concerns were raised that it may be open to potential criticism, especially in relation to the fact that we had asked Joanne to chair it, and we asked her because we absolutely have no doubt in her professionalism and ability to independently review, lead a review of this nature. Joanne had also never worked in maternity services, so she was coming in with fresh eyes. We asked the MIA to provide oversight of the process and to provide additional assurance to the board into the robustness and validity of the process. And the MIAA have monitored the review, and it describes its observations, and they're included in the reference pack for completeness. The panel undertook interviews, focus groups. They reviewed a significant number of files and information over a number of months. And it was a challenge because some of the information was difficult to find. And only yesterday I found that actually there was a lot of information that had been held in our in one of our teams that I didn't know about. And that David had actually led a lot of that work. So it was quite hard to find some of the information. And in our transition to 365, again, some of the historical information was more difficult to find. And it did mean that there was a delay to the original deadline to enable the additional information that we found to be reviewed. And that was reflected in our own learning. So standard operating procedures been developed for presenting evidence to make it easier for any future reviewers to easily look at how the information is collected. The panel concluded that 15 out of 18 recommendations have been delivered and sustained. 3 had been partly sustained, and not because we'd stopped doing something, but because actually there had been further improvements that meant that we could enhance what we'd already done. 2 of these were linked to the implementation of BadgerNet across the integrated care system, and our own Morecambe Bay rollout starts in July, and the whole thing will be then completed by December. The third link to more recent improvement work that was that had been undertaken to and is still underway to enhance governance across the trust with support from external advisors and experts. And this service was an early implementer. The panel recognised the digital improvement work that was underway, and they wanted to see it embedded before signing it off as fully sustained. And so we've agreed that we will demonstrate through audits that that has been sustained. MIAA were asked to review clarity of the mandate to the panel from the board, the skills of the panel to undertake the review and to consider the process, as I mentioned earlier, and their findings are on page 20 to 25 of the reference pack. MIAA reflect that they did not observe any panel member showing any bias or vested interests, and they also provided some recommendations for any future internal review that the Trust might sponsor. So the Board of Directors is asked to agree to the findings and recommendations of the panel review, to approve the action plan that's developed and request updates to the Quality Assurance Committee until all actions are closed. And Chairman, if the board agrees to that, I'm then going to hand over for any questions, and probably Joanne will pick up any of those as I wasn't part of the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So you've led us nicely into the recommendations, but before I ask the board to comment on the recommendations, Jill, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I know I had an observational role, but I do think it would be helpful, particularly if Joanne's here on the call, if she could just tell the board how much evidence from her point of view that was reviewed, and just explain how she triangulated that. And I wonder if at the same time she could, the team couldn't visit the units because of the pandemic, what they did in lieu of being able to visit the unit. So if she could deal with those two things, I think it would give some assurance to the board about how it worked.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Joanne. Welcome. It's good to see you again. Over to you. So two points in response to Jill, and then I've got Jeff, as Jeff's got his hand up, so I'll come back to Jeff when you've spoken.
Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see you as well. In terms of the evidence, there were hundreds and hundreds of pieces of evidence, from training records right the way through to guidance policies, information that we'd got obviously in relation to the Ockenden. We'd received the initial submission. So there's hundreds and hundreds of pieces. Obviously, we were in the middle of a pandemic, and we used the 365 platform in order to have team meetings with all the panel members. The evidence was uploaded to the 365 platform, so the individual panel members could access that at a time was convenient to them, because obviously, with the exception of myself, other people had other work commitments. We then met on a fortnightly basis initially as a panel, and Jill attended some of those as an observation. All of those meetings were recorded for panel members who were not able to attend. I was accessible in between if anybody had queries around any of the evidence or anything from the meetings. And again, we used those meetings to triangulate that evidence. We also, obviously the pandemic, we were initially hoping that we would have been able to do a visit in February. One of the panel members actually was residing in Wales, so for her, and she was actually the only member of the panel who'd never visited any of the units previously. So we'd made a decision, it was far too risky, she wouldn't have been able to get out of the country anyway. And so we facilitated some focus groups. And that was for, again, a range of clinical staff and non-clinical staff, so that we were able to record all of those. So every single panel member had an opportunity to review those recordings. And again, if any questions came up from those, any information that we received or evidence, we actually had the opportunity to go back to any of those teams to clarify that information. So I was really happy that we had a very robust process in order to review that. As Sue's already alluded, we'd come to some conclusions, and that's when it became apparent that some of the evidence had not been available. That wasn't anybody's fault. That was because the team that were working within the service hadn't been around in 2016. So that gave us another opportunity. And I have to say, every single member of the panel has been really tenacious in wanting to seek out the evidence. They've not just gone, oh, we've not seen it. They were really tenacious in seeking that evidence. Really, we were able to meet with some more recent service users, so some of the mums that had recently had babies within the service. And again, you know, everybody that we met were open and honest about their experiences, whether that was staff or whether that was service users. So, you know, I'm really happy with the process and the way that we've, you know, come forward with these. I regularly also touch base with the Mersey Internal Audit lead, and again, she's been able to access any of the evidence that we've been able to review. She's listened into, you know, the recordings, etc. So for me, that's been really good because I've had an independent who's been able to sort of, you know, assure me that the methodology that I was using was the right methodology. Is that helpful? Has that clarified your points, Jill?
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Jeff, over to you, please.
Thanks, Mike. I was involved in the original review after the Kirkup report, you know, as part of the CCG representative. So this is quite dear to my heart, and this is not a criticism; it's just an ask, and that is because I'm not deeply involved in this work. So it's compare and contrast then and now. What's different in our approach now to 2000? Was it 2015? No, it wasn't. Was it 2000?
It was 2000. Yeah.
It was 2015. So what's different? What's better? What will we decide to do that's different? That means we'll be even better next time, and our improvement will be better.
I think, Jeff, that's one of the things that we've considered in relation to this, because we're at a different time period. So you're not comparing apples and apples in right. The sense that the system is different. So our partners was with St Mary's Hospital in terms of that partnership arrangement. That's been superseded by the LMS. The ICS has been developed. So that's one of the things that we've had to consider in this, and that's what I hope we've captured in the report, in where we've been able to say it's not the same, the system is different. So I think the recommendation where we've said it's partially upheld, that's because the trust as a board and Sue and the governance leads, they've introduced the title is going to escape me now. Sue might be able to help me here, but you know, it's about what's changed in terms of the reporting, but that's fairly new in being embedded. And I think, you know, those are the sort of things that, well, we didn't have that in 2015, we didn't have that in 2016, and that's all really good practice. But it makes it that, so to actually pinpoint one thing, Jeff, that says, well, this is why it's different and this is why it's better, I think all I can say, it hasn't regressed. There's none of the services that we've looked at and we've thought, actually, that's worse than when it was 2016, when that initial review was done. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. Sue, I've got your hand up. Aaron as well. Okay, Sue first, then Aaron.
I think Adrian was first after Jeff.
All right, my apologies, Adrian. If we go Adrian, Sue, then Aaron.
Thanks, Chair. And Joanne, I just wanted to thank you and the team for the thoroughness of the report and the detail that you've gone into. I just really wanted to focus on the recommendations within the action plan, which I thought were excellent, really. I can see that there's, my question really is about the closed loop thinking, so that we're actually following the actions. So I like the responsibilities, so the identified individuals and the reporting mechanism. My question is, are you confident that Safe Today will be able to escalate any issues that emerge quickly enough up to the board? Are you confident that that's the appropriate way to do it in terms of that annual review, or do you think that that should come directly to the board? Thank you.
I think that is the appropriate, and that's the term that I was seeking around. It's the Safe Today reports, and I think it is. I think that again, it's really, that is the mechanism in which to do that, and it's pinpointing issues very quickly. And I think that's because that's done monthly. That as that mechanism, and again through the quality committee, through the non-exec director and Andrea on that, and who leads on that that committee to get that escalated up. You know, there was some discussion around whether we as a panel you know, owned that action plan, and I was really clear, no, it's not our action plan. What we've done is produced a report. We've made a recommendation in how we think those loops can be closed, and that's why we framed that action plan in the way that we have done.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. Adrian, you okay with that? Yeah. Sue, and then Aaron, if you could just summarise. Yeah, go on, Sue.
I guess so. What I picked up from the report and from my subsequent discussion with Joanne, and I've also picked up with Elaine, our midwifery director, is the things that really resulted in the avoidable deaths were things around a denial that things weren't working well, a lack of openness and honesty and listening to the families, and those kind of things are transformed. You know, we had a very awful incident last year. The family have been involved all the way through, even though, you know, the outcome for them hasn't been good. The sharing and the learning is so much better. That doesn't mean there isn't more to do. There is. But the kind of things that got us in that awful position in the first place was just a lack of process, listening, learning, reporting. We're not perfect, absolutely not. But is there? Am I confident that we have processes and systems in place to pick up problems and deal with them? Yes, I am. And am I confident that we will be honest and open? I am. So I think that's the difference for me, is the way that we behave, listen, conduct, care.
If I may, Chair, I think, you know, I'm going to re-echo what Sue has said. You know, everybody that we met were open and honest. They've shared clinical incidents that, you know, if you were wanting to hide things, you wouldn't have shared. You know, I was well supported by Sue Harding, and who's, you know, anaesthetist, she does obstetrics. So we had that rigour in relation to that. But staff were open and honest in terms of we're not perfect, but they were very proud. And I think, you know, there was an energy around the people that we met, that they were very proud of the service that they worked in, and that, but they acknowledged, they were the first to acknowledge there were still things to do to make it even better. So, you know, I would concur with what Sue is saying.
Thanks, Joanne, and thanks, Sue. Aaron, final comment, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to bring us back to the contextual piece that I gave at the start of this agenda item. And I promise I don't want to be appearing as kind of, you know, not recognising this piece of work as incredibly positive, because it is, and it's been delivered superbly, and we have all the evidence and assurance around the scope of work that was asked of Joanne and the panel and others to do. Some things are different though. So I want the board to recognise that this report as it stands is not the mechanism for us to give a sense of current performance, safe today, and the quality of our maternity services today. It is a standalone recommendation review from Kirkup 5 years ago, and it's very clear that there has been progress made and there has been sustained improvements made. But some things are different today than 5 years ago. So we know that our governance, risk and assurance structures need developing, and reliant on an annual report, that's not good enough for me as a chief executive. I want to make sure that we're really crystal clear with evidence that the up and down, board to ward, quality oversight metrics and the quality oversight approach we have are working effectively. And today we know they need to improve, because that's the work that we're doing with the Good Governance Institute, and we're part way through improving that. We also know that the operating environment and the measure of what good looks like for a maternity service is moving. You know, we've seen what a regulatory environment for maternity services under previous measures has led to, you know, and we know in headlines in various reviews what that means. And you can see and hear post Ockenden and with the CQC approach that the measures, the expectations of what a good maternity service looks like, I think are moving. And we need to understand as a board how far away we might be from that new measure of success and what improvement work we might need to do to close those gaps. That is not saying that we don't have a safe service today. It's not saying that the infrastructure we have passes muster. It's what we've got in terms of the risk oversight and safety oversight. But I don't want us to sign this off and say, well, it's where it needs to be now, because I think some things are moving and we need to reflect on what that means for us as a trust in terms of our services and respond accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. We take that in the context. Jill, you want to respond?
Yeah, I just want to reassure the board about the focus of the Quality Committee. It's really good to have seen this report and to see the work that's been done post Kirkup and to see how sustained it's been and to focus on the areas we've more work to do. But we've also got a site right down from the Safe Today to the Enhanced Support Programme, and the maternity service is on that programme because we have concerns about it. And you know, the Quality Committee is aware of both of those things, and so I just want to assure the board that we have sight of that, and we don't see that as a contradiction. We see that as this is a team with the ability to make significant changes and have made them and sustained them, but there are other things that we need to do to improve the service to the standard that we think we want it to be.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Joanne, final word?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge the work and the support I've received from the panel. You know, they've been amazing. They too, you know, it's been a pandemic for everybody and we acknowledge that, but they really have stuck with this, and I really want to acknowledge them, you know, on this call today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll minute that, Joanne, to make sure as well. Now we're asked to approve the final draft report for publication, the sharing of the report, and to request updates through the Quality Assurance Committee until all the actions are closed. Colleagues happy to approve those? Yeah, thank you. Then it's been approved. Joanne, thank you. Hopefully we'll see you again. Please pass our thanks to all the colleagues.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers, Joanne.
We'll move on then to item 59, still under you, Sue, Executive Chief Nurse. Can you take us through it, please?
I can. And again, we're staying on maternity. So this is around the NHS resolution clinical negligence scheme for trusts, or CNST. So the maternity incentive scheme applies to all acute trusts that deliver maternity services and are members of CNST. As in years 1 and 2, members will contribute an additional 10% of the CNST maternity premium to the scheme, creating the CNST Maternity Incident Fund. As in previous year, the scheme incentivises 10 maternity safety actions. Trusts can demonstrate that they've achieved all of the 10 safety actions, and if they can demonstrate that, they will recover the element of their contribution, their 10% relating to the incentive fund, and will also receive a share of any unallocated funds. So in year 2, the last year, that saw UHMBT receive £616,000. So it's not a, you know, it's an important number for us. The attached documents reference the trust evidence to demonstrate our position in relation to the safety standards. And members of the board are going to note that there are 2 elements that are in the process of being delivered in relation to one of the safety actions, and these are detailed in the paper. Our submission will be cross-referenced against national data sets, and we believe that our submission does meet the criteria set out nationally. So I'm going to ask the board to note the evidence in Appendix A in support of the submission, to be assured of the compliance with the safe staffing standards as detailed in Appendix B, which is items 59.1 and 59.2 in the reference pack, and to authorise the Chief Executive to sign the board declaration form prior to its submission to NHS resolution.
Thanks, Sue. It seems very clear, very rational. All the information required is there. It's a simple request. Hugh, then Bruce.
Thanks, Chair. Just to let the board know that this was considered at the Quality Committee last week. The Quality Committee looked at it and was happy that I was reassured at that point that the actions that needed to be taken in order to make sure that we would be compliant would be in place. So just wanted to assure the board of that, but also just to check with Sue, one of the dates that I've got technical problems, so I can't open the papers and look at the meeting at the same time. So, but when I was reading them last night, that one of the dates for one of the areas was, I think, about 5 or 6 days that we would achieve it, was 5 or 6, that it would come into place. It was, I think it was one of the scans or something like that, that would come into place. We would be doing it about 5 or 6 days after the required date that we needed to achieve everything by. So I just wanted to check that we would still be compliant, because that was in, I presume because that was in process or something like that.
Yeah, I met with the care group this week, and they assure me that it meets the criteria. So because we will have it, we've got the machines, everything's in progressing well, and we will meet it, that won't stop us from meeting the criteria.
Excellent, thank you.
Although clearly NHSEI will decide that for sure, but that's our belief.
Right.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, just for information, I think we pay about 14 million a year to NHS Resolution for the scheme. The point I wanted to make was, is there an external audit on our submission, first of all? Because I do recall that Shrewsbury and Telford, when they had their maternity issues, had this incentive taken off them.
Yes, there is, and that's in the paper, Bruce. It goes through all of the different external reviews that our submission will go through. So if we pass all of those, then we will get the CNST payment back and a measure of that incentive. Now, we believe that our application, when it goes in, will meet those tests. So we can only do what we believe is right and submit what we believe is right. But what we don't want to do is say that we have already achieved something if we haven't yet achieved it. And I think that that's what Shrewsbury had done. They'd actually said that they'd already achieved it when they haven't. So we'd rather be truthful and they can see where we're up to than try and kind of sneak it under the radar.
Thanks, Sue.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Sue. Liz, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sue, for presenting the report. Can I just, I assume, but I don't want to assume, so if you could tell us what we've got in place, but so the two areas where we're waiting for the equipment to come in and we're going to start from early July, and I think the other area is where named consultants for some ladies that are at higher risk is going to come in at the end of July. So going forward, we know that our patients that hit those criteria are going to receive that standard of care, but there will be ladies that have been, say, sort of hitting those sort of levels March, April, May, June. Are we going to do a sort of backward sweep and review of those cases and bring those ladies forward for this type of review?
Yes, we will do where we can. So some we will be able to do a backward sweep of, others won't hit the criteria anymore. So we need a dedicated sort of point at which everything happens from then, which is that dedicated point. We will sweep back what we can sweep back.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Sue. So I can't see any further hands up. Aaron, thank you for keeping me with the prompts. So we're asked to note the evidence in Appendix A and support the submission and the achievement of the 10 safety actions, to be assured of compliance in Appendix B, and to authorise the Chief Executive to sign the declaration form prior to its submission to NHS Resolution. Happy with that? Prove it. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move on to the performance element of the board now. We'll start with item 60, the integrated performance dashboard. Sue, it's got your name on here to present, so I'll pass the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. I think this is my last agenda item today, so you will have a rest from my voice very, very shortly. So in relation to the integrated quality and performance report, the focus of the report's May 21. It identifies the key risks for the organisation, reviews the performance against important national indicators and those areas of focus agreed by the board. It also highlights some of the achievements as well. Key to bring to the board's attention are, so whilst we're seeing a national increase in C. diff admissions to local hospitals, so regional increases to CD admissions to local hospitals, to date, we are not experiencing the same increase. However, it could change and we remain vigilant. A vacancy in our complaints team has now been recruited too, so that will result in improvements to times for responding to complaints over the next quarter. So I just want to give that assurance. In relation to workforce, we've got some good news really. The nurse vacancy rates are now at 2.2%, which is the lowest I've ever known them in this organisation, or actually in any of the number of organisations I've worked in previously. And I believe it may be the lowest vacancy level in the country. It's certainly one of the lowest. However, the nursing workforce plan for this year shows that we expect a turnover of 315 people. So we need to be really, really on the ball and not become complacent. We do need to continue to recruit in order to maintain the progress. And given our current financial position, we do need to hold our nerve, because otherwise we'll end up going backwards very, very quickly. So I just want to kind of put that line in the sand. Whilst overall the Band 8A and above appraisals are currently low, there is a clear expectation and a plan in place to ensure that these are completed by the end of July. We believe that that will be absolutely achieved. The past month has seen the completion of the organisational development interventions within both urology and Furness Paediatrics. Both programmes have resulted in positive, measurable change. The urology culture transformation programme saw an average improvement of 45% increase in key metrics such as trust, leadership and communication. In the performance quadrant, A&E attendances remain consistently high across the whole system. Now it's not in there, but we did have a recent perfect week, which saw the trust performing well against both the ICS and national benchmarks. And I think it is worth referencing that because it was quite significant improvements and achievement for us. For the past 10 months, RTT has improved with a 4.06% increase to 67.67 at the end of May. 383 fewer patients have had to wait longer than 52 weeks. So that's still too many patients waiting, but you can see 383 fewer patients is an absolute move in the right direction. And again, important to recognise the hard work that's gone into achieving that. However, waiting list size has increased and plans to mitigate that are included in the report. I think it's important to reference stroke improvement plan. Good progress has been made against the actions, and any risks to completion are escalated through calls that take place 3 times a week. So there's really close support wrapped around the team. Importantly, Q4 SNAP data, stroke data has been released, and both Furness and RLI have both improved and are now scoring D. Improvements have occurred across the vast majority of key performance indicators in that audit, with no deterioration in any of the 10 domains. And I think it's just important that the board are aware of that. The next 4 weeks are going to see completion of the CQC Section 31 Action Plan, which includes progress of the I3 IT live stroke tracking system. It'll see final staffing model for each stroke unit and provide data on the ring fencing of stroke beds and any impact on patient outcomes. So really important period coming up. In relation to finance, the summary report clearly describes the current position, and I don't want to go through that. What I do want to say is that a deficit of 1.7 million at the end of May is in line with our submitted plans. It does, of course, finance require ongoing improvement for the remainder of the first half of the financial year in order to achieve financial balance and recover the year-to-date deficit, whilst supporting our necessary and priority investments in service improvement, effective management of risk associated with our response to a number of pressures, such as urgent care demand, delivery of the elective recovery and accelerator programmes. I think there's going to be, some very challenging discussions for us as a board, given the pressures on finance performance and maintaining our quality. So, we need to be aware of that and ready for that. And the board will receive a Q1 financial review and forecast at its next meeting, which will provide further information on progress on this and the development of the longer term sustainable financial improvement plan. And I think probably it's worth mentioning, Chris, it's not in here, but we did get our accounts in. Very, very challenging time. Hats off, especially to Jane Stanley. I don't know if you want to say anything more on that. If not, I'll hand back over to the chairman.
Okay, I'll just check. Chris, do you want to say anything?
Not at this stage, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Aaron, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's just a quick ask, Chair. It's very good that we are responding quickly to and rightly so, the Section 31 letter, given the issues that were highlighted in Stroke, and good to see the first pass of the audit data showing early signs of that improvement. I would want to see a deep dive into Stroke service safety coming back to board. I think it's useful to get the updates on the progress against the improvement plan. I would like to see something different to board on Stroke next month, please. So quality committee obviously oversight on some of the quality metrics, but I think if we bring something under the IPR agenda, but with a deep dive, maybe for a 10 or 15 minute item on Stroke safety, Stroke services, and getting board assurance on the current safety provision, please.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that as a proposal to the board. Adrian, then Hugh, please.
I think it was Hugh first. I'll go after Hugh. Thank you.
That's very gentlemanly of you, Adrian. Hugh.
Thank you, Adrian. So a couple of points. I'd support what Aaron's just said. We looked at this the Stroke certainly the CQC action plan at the Quality Committee last week, and then we received now today obviously the Q4 SNAP data, which is in one sense after CQC have had that, and then all the things that have come back from it. And so it does feel, Aaron, that we're sort of a bit on the back foot about this. So I think it would be really good not only to have to bring it back, have a bit of a deep dive, but to have some thinking about how we get an early, perhaps earlier indication of things like this going on, because obviously when you look at the SNAP data over a period of time, that Q4 is significantly worse than the previous two quarters, and that's probably what caught us a bit on the back foot. And so I think that's it's important, not just for Stroke, but bit more widely. The other thing I want to say, which is on another issue, Mike, is that there's some really good stuff in here about cancer, and particularly the 2-week wait. They're now hitting the required standards. And at the Quality Committee last week, we had an in-depth report on the breast service and how the work that they've done since December. And I really want to highlight that there's been some really excellent work that's taken place in that service, and looking at the clinical model and the way that they address things. And I understand that there are lessons from that will be learned and shared with other areas across the trust. So I think we just need to acknowledge the turnaround that's taken place in the 2-week waits for breast cancer, for people with suspected breast cancer. I think that's excellent.
Okay, thank you. We'll take your first point as a recommendation, which adds on to Aaron's point, and we'll take your second points into the minutes. Adrian.
Thanks, Chair. Just picking up on Hugh's points, I mean, there are some really remarkable indicators of performance across the trust, so that's to be commended. And I'd just like to potentially link that with the staffing levels. So I do think we need to make that link there. Aaron, quite rightly, you spoke about the pressures which are just around the corner with winter. And so I just wanted to pick up on your comments, really, Sue, about the just the levels of recruitment. They're looking really good at the moment, but there are medium and long-term challenges, aren't there? Which I do feel that the board are actually not fully sighted on. And it does talk in the report, and we talked about a pipeline around recruitment. We know about staff who might not be retained because of their age profile, and just the general retention profile in terms of people moving on from the trust. And we know that we're going to hit challenges with recruitment, particularly with overseas recruitment in the medium to long term. So I think it would be great if we could just have some more information just to inform us on that risk profile. And I think that would help just to make that link with performance more pertinent. My second thing really is about the health and well-being of the staff. Obviously, they are largely exhausted, and there are services that the trust is providing. But I'd just like some reassurance that we've got enough of those services that are addressing the key issues around anxiety, stress and depression. If we could just have some more information to the board around that, and where, if there are any shortages or any deficits, we could look to improve that position, either through internal use of our staff or potentially seeking some external support as well. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take both your points as proposals. It looks like it's being supported, Adrian, so we'll take those as proposals to take forward. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Chair. My question was to Leanne. Sue made reference to the perfect week, and we actually all saw the emails that came out each day, noting the successes of the day and what had been achieved. And there was some really, really powerful stuff in there. So what learning are we taking, and what changes are we making to implement those benefits to sort of give us a little bit of headspace and room going into the winter pressures? Because I noticed on some of the reports that have come through to finance, talking about the acuity of patients now presenting at A&E. So we know that we've got poorly people anyway, but a lot of people, because they stayed at home during COVID and not sought treatment, have worsened, and their health worsened.
Yeah, thanks. I can take that, Chair. So in terms of the perfect week, that was an ICS initiative that we carried out last week across the ICS, and as Aaron popped in the chat, we were top of the pack in terms of our delivery and recovery of A&E performance, and overachieved our trajectory for that week, which is a positive thing. I think the key challenge is how you sustain that, because it was a full-scale redirection of everyone's efforts pointed just to urgent care for that week. Some of that is not sustainable without down-tooling in some of the other services that we've got to provide. What we're doing now, there's about 3 things I just want to pick up. So the first thing is that we've actually continued the perfect week, and so we're doing something called Safer Start. So we're doing the Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday initiative. So we're rolling the same pattern as we found earlier on in the week to give us the some pressure relief in terms of Monday and Tuesday when we feel the greatest pressure in the emergency departments. And we've also done an analysis with our colleagues across NHSEI who are supporting the initiative with us to collate all the learning benefits, and we've collated that already. We've got 2 sessions planned for next week to work across the care groups to review those items we can sustain within our core services and those that we will need some support resourcing wise to continue. But much of that is already included within our urgent care recovery plan.
Okay, thanks, Leanne. Liz, you're happy with that? Yeah, Hugh, you've got a hand up. Is that a legacy hand, as they call them these days? Yeah, got it. Brilliant. And then there was something in the chat about Lynn. Do you want to respond to anything in the points that Adrian raised while we're here in the board?
Thanks, Chair. I was just responding in the chat, actually. Yes, we are currently working with NHSEI with regard to our absence, what we can improve on, how we can change our services, but we're also doing a deep dive with a focus around MSK and anxiety and depression. I'm pleased to say that we've been able to appoint the clinical callback nurse to support our occupational health and colleagues who not only are absent, but also to keep our colleagues in work. We are undertaking that deep dive. There is an intention, Adrian, to bring it to Workforce Assurance Committee. With regard to recruitment, we are looking at the risks. We've redone the risk on the register around our recruitment. We're taking it wider now than nursing, because yes, we need to maintain our nursing, and we have a methodology for our numbers. You know, the target is 30 a month, but we also need to look at and improve on our, grow our own. But we're looking now at AHPs and our medical colleagues with focuses on not just nursing, but our wider clinical. And that also is coming to Workforce Assurance Committee, and their proposals, they're on the agenda for the meeting, the next meeting, which is Workforce.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. We'll take that as an update to where we are at the moment, but still take Adrian's proposal that further work needs to be done on this, and it'll come back to the board via the Workforce Assurance Committee if necessary. Hugh, over to you, please.
So just a question on the finance side of things, Chair. Clearly, the performance is stated to be as expected, but within that, there are obviously some clear risks associated with the cost releasing programs that I assume the care groups are undertaking, and so the savings have been weighted to come in over the latter part of the first half of the year. I just wonder if Chris can perhaps give us some indication of how confident he is that those will actually come in, because it's always a very high risk. It's always a very high risk area when you have things in plan and you hope that they might come on. I was just wondering if we could have just a little bit, not to take loads of time, but just perhaps a little bit more detail about where the real risks might be on that.
Yes, of course. Chair, that shall I respond? So couple of things. It is tempting for me to focus on the risk associated with the savings, but as in Sue's presentation, I did look to have it highlighted that, you know, the context of the plan with the extraordinary pressures that we've been seeing on urgent care is also relevant, because our response, we could achieve our savings and then miss the balance target. So I do try to report in that way, but you're absolutely right, Hugh, that the nature of the planning round and the timing of the allocations left us with some uncertainty as to the whole scale of the challenge until quite late in the day, which resulted in us having a bit of a more back-ended plan than we would like. Now, we do need to do detailed work on our forecast, which I do on a quarterly basis, and we'll be bringing that back to the board next time. But suffice to say, we've identified that we're still working on mitigations of around £4 to £5 million. That's not that we've got £4 to £5 million with no idea where it's coming from. That's our assessment of a potential likely outcome of our existing schemes, and our key mitigation for that is the addressing those factors that are slipping existing plans, because actually getting the most out of established plans is a better first line response than looking for new ones. But we are working hard on the pipeline, and also we've extended our working arrangement around our field of vision to work more closely with our ICP partners to make sure that we look at risk across our health system, because the allocations are coming in on a place base, and one response in one area might cause a pressure in another. So but equally, one opportunity in one area can create another. So we're bringing forward all of our pipeline as the sort of secondary response to that. I'm going to do a much more detailed presentation to the board next time, having gone through the Finance Committee on the quarterly financial position and our half one forecast.
Okay.
Excellent,
Thanks.
excellent. That'll be great to get that presentation at the next board. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that's cleared off my questions as well, Hugh. So thank you. Any further questions? No. Sue, you've completed your report. Just checking. Okay. Thank you. Then colleagues will accept that. We note it. We've got a few proposals. And Chris, we know you're coming back next month around the really important issue of finance. So we'll move on then to item 61, urgent care recovery plan. I've got Chief Operating Officer. Who's speaking on that then?
That's myself, Chair. I'll take that this morning. So ordinarily, the board would expect to see a winter resilience plan coming to this meeting in the autumn. But in recognition of the pressure that we've seen as we've come through the initial waves of COVID last year and the first half of this year, the A&E Delivery Board has put in place a set of actions that are designed to be delivered and used all year round, so not just for Christmas, to support urgent care performance improvements. And that's in the form of the Urgent Care Recovery Plan, which you've got in the papers. The plan itself has been co-designed with system partners and colleagues from the improvement team, and it's been signed off by the A&E Delivery Board last month in May. The plan is based around 5 key elements. The first is a data modelling methodology, which is effectively a demand and capacity analysis to assess the shortfalls in capacity in terms of bed equivalents and target the improvements needed through the 4 key work streams that follow on from that. For FGH, this highlights a deficit of between 25 to 50 beds. That's the difference between summer versus winter. And for Lancaster, it's up to 80 to 140 beds, worst case, based on the same basis. In terms of pre-hospital admission avoidance, that includes things like 7-day rapid response, the frailty coordination services that we've got in place, and a series of primary care and mental health initiatives in recognition of the pressure both in our partner organisations across those 2 sectors. The front door navigation piece includes focus around triage and streaming at the emergency department and initiatives within the ED itself, as well as same-day emergency care, that's called SDEC in the pack, a staffing review in terms of nursing and ED medical staff, and a series of estates improvements that has been the legacy of the work that we've done throughout COVID last year. The improved hospital floor element involves specific length of stay reductions focused on trauma and orthopaedics, where there's some opportunities to be gained, additional escalation capacity which we've got in place, and improvements around the ward and the board round processes we've got on our base wards in the hospital. The last element talks to enhanced early supported discharge. So this is support from our partner organisations, which includes work around enhancing our discharge to assess provision, implementing the best practice discharge guidance that came into play last year, and additional step down capacity out of hospital to support flow. The plan is driven by a newly formed tactical group, which is a cross-partner group, and is supported by UHMBT's PMO team, and all of which is overseen by the A&E Delivery Board. Internally, the plan will be reported through to the Finance and Performance Committee within the Trust. And there is a series of task and finish groups that support all of that work that sit underneath that get the work done in the week on a frequent basis, replicating what we've done with stroke. It's important to note at the time of writing, there are residual gaps in the funding requirements to deliver the plan in its entirety. Approximately about 50% of the required funding is secured through things like the ERF and accelerator monies that we've been working with across the ICS, with the remaining funding being sought via ICS, CCG and other UHMB sources that Chris and I are working on with our partner organisations. In terms of the ask of the board today, the board is asked to approve the plan and its approach, subject to the finalisation of the funding work that's already in train. I'll stop there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Leanne. Good summary of the paper. Quick question from me before I ask everyone to, I see Bruce has approved it. Will it work?
So I think in terms of confidence, Chair, so we're confident that we have the right plan and we've got the right level of PMO infrastructure and approach through the support from the improvement team to support its oversight and drive the delivery. We understand the resources that's needed to be delivered. We'll have a final picture of that on Friday. And we have the right level of ICS and Bay Health and Care partner support across the system. However, there are risks associated with it that the board do need to be aware of. So there are risks associated with the funding, obviously, and there is further risks associated with the impact of further waves in COVID, which we're not sure what we'll do as a result of the lifting of the restrictions in July. And there is large pressure in our urgent care system, as we've seen throughout the performance pack in the IPR. And there is also pressure across our partner organisations, and particularly want to call out primary care and mental health, because the pressure that those sectors are under is significant in terms of demand for their services. And we've already talked about staff attendance and health and wellbeing, and while we've made a lot of inroads in recruitments, we've still got the challenge in terms of sickness associated with COVID that's a risk for us.
Okay, so it's not quite a yes, that then.
No.
It's not quite a no either. So you're asking us to approve it subject to the finances and subject to the events of fate. But can you come back to the board or somebody, I know it's going to finance, to let us know that progress is continuing as planned, and also to let us know if it isn't, why it isn't. You know, 'cause you're asking us to approve a plan subject to funding, so we're asking for assurance, really. Really, this is a finger in the air, but we'll take that. I'll go to Hugh and then Liz.
Thanks, Chair. It's a question about the 85% occupancy stuff. To my mind, that's a figure that I've never seen that I can remember in my career. That there's that amount of, at this time, there's that amount of flex in the system. Is that a national figure, or that somebody sort of thought would be nice to achieve across the country? I mean, it would be lovely to achieve, but in the current position, what sort of world are we living in when we're talking about that sort of figure? I mean, maybe that's a slightly strange way to put a question, but I have to say I read it and sort of thought, gosh.
Yes.
I can respond, Leanne, and just say it's a national standard. We're expected to meet it. It's across all trusts in England. It's from central government.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay. Liz?
Sorry, Mike, I've just put in the chat, it's Jill next, and then I'll go after Jill.
All right, so apologies, Jill. Jill, over to you, then Liz.
Sorry. One I've just put on chat, which is presumably we're not go ahead if we haven't got funding in certain areas. I just want assurance that's not the case. That's the case, I mean. And my second one was asking Leanne about the mental health risk, because I can see the numbers of mental health patients are going up. We feel like where we were before, being asked to deal with these extra number of people, which is not our business. And so what confidence have we about dealing with that risk?
Thanks, Jill. So in terms of the funding, Chris and I are working through the methodology, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So by Friday, we'll have a consolidated view of all of the asks, if you like, all of the initiatives. What we're then going to do is work out effectively biggest bang for our buck. So where would we prioritise our limited resources? And that's the exercise that we're working through this week. So that'll be finalised by Friday. So we're part way through that now with the view that we'd invest in the biggest impact schemes first and then draw a line thereafter. So that's the approach. In terms of mental health, so within the mental health element of the urgent care recovery plan, there's a series of initiatives designed to help support demand management, increase their bed capacity. One of the key things that they're working with the hospital on is the development of MUACs, where they are actually going to be on site with us from the middle of July. So they will be on site and co-located with the RLI, so that they're across the road from our ED department, which is where our mental health facility is. At the moment, they're at a different location, so the response times are slower. So that will improve, but acknowledge there is nationally large risks in mental health.
Okay, thanks, Leanne. Liz, you've got your hand up then, Shahidul. And just remind colleagues of time, it's 25 past. We said we'd finish at 25 to, so we've still got six agenda items yet. So Liz, then yourself, Shahidul.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I was going to ask about the funding gap, so it's good to know that that's going to come back to us. But what does, if this plan slips and we end up, because obviously there's huge pressures on beds, what's it going to do to the plan for the core plus activity to get through the waiting times, and also the amount of funding that's in, you know, that could be clawed back, if you will, for not hitting those targets? It strikes me it's a bit of a game of Jenga, isn't it? That something can be pulled out somewhere and the whole thing is just going to go whoosh.
Yeah, I take it that's a comment, Liz, and we note your comment. Okay, Shahidul.
It was just to answer quickly the Hughes point around 85%. The number came from during COVID time. It was noted that that's a kind of number where hospitals were asked to seek the Nightingale ward access for the COVID patients. And it worked, though it's not needed in our region, it worked quite well in some areas in South. And that number did stick since that ward. I wouldn't be aware about the evidence base, how it actually works. Tells.
Shahidul, yeah, I think there's a note of sympathy towards that comment from the board members. We don't know where it's from, but we're stuck with it. Okay, the recommendations is to consider the content of the report, which I believe we have done, approve the urgent care recovery plan, subject to finalisation of funding. That's the important caveat on this. We're not going ahead with this plan if there's no funding. Please be very clear about that. The board is not approving this plan unless there's funding for it. So keep the relevant subcommittee updated and let the board know how it's getting on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you for that. That was really good. I believe you're still on as we move on to the new hospitals programmes, item 62.
No, well, I think you're sick of the sound of my voice, Chair, so I think Aaron's taken new hospitals programme.
Apologies. Thanks, Leanne. Over to you, Aaron.
Very briefly, Chair, because this is for board approval only. It's a change to the governance arrangements for the new hospitals programme as we transition from project and options development through to more meaningful discussions on finalising shortlist options and business case approval. You can see a refinement of the strategic oversight group, more board focused, and the establishment of 2 trust advisory groups with NED and senior executive input. And there's some refinement into the scope in terms of reference of those committees. So it should be very clear in the paper as to how this board contributes to final decisions, who around this board table is included in the SOG. That would be me, myself, the chair and Kate. And I'll work with the chair on NED and senior executive attendance for the advisory groups. So it's here for approval. Mike, it's going also to Lancs Teaching Hospitals. It has previously been through Provider Collaborative and the SOG.
Okay, seems simple enough. Colleagues, you're happy to approve it? Thank you. Then next item, still with you, Aaron, Morecambe Bay Trust Improvement Board, item 63.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just picking up on Hugh's point about capacity, absolutely. It comes back to the point we made about a revisit of priorities in the summer for Q3 and Q4. Again, similarly brief item. This is the update from the improvement group that reports into the System Improvement Board. We're aware of the work that is being pointed through this group around GGI, urology, the enhanced support programs, the work that we're doing around composite action plan, system improvement work. Good progress, both at the improvement group and then ratified at the improvement board. In particular, recognition of the pace and scale of change around the stroke improvement work, which was recognised. We have also taken through the mortality review paper that Dr. Barry presented here at the board last month, equally well received, both in terms of assurance of current mortality rates, but also the structure we put around improvements around mortality reviews and shared learning. For the next improvement group, we're obviously awaiting final reports from CQC. That's likely to include further improvement actions that will sit under that remit. And we'll also be taking forward some presentations into the improvement group around the urgent care recovery plan that Leanne's just outlined really well, and the Hive service improvement approach, both of which are receiving significant recognition and plaudits at regional level and have been asked to come back in order to share and then cascade through ICS. So good at this point. I'm conscious that this work largely is updating on progress against things. You will have noted my feedback on stroke in particular. I'll want to work with yourself, Chair, and the exec team on some deep dive activities into the impact and the outcomes of this work that we're progressing. We do take assurance or reassurance on progress. I want to make sure we keep that same focus on the so what. So we'll start to think about how we bring some of that deep dive activity on outcomes as a result into board. That's it for me, Chair.
Thank you. And we're asked to note the content of this paper, but just to ask you, any assurance issues that you need to bring to the attention of the board outside of the content of the paper?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, we note the content. Thank you. Thanks very much, Aaron. Then we'll move on to item 64, minutes and updates of the reporting group. Liz, if I can start with you, please, audit committee update.
Thanks, Mike. So the accounts have, after a very, very long and arduous process, have been completed and signed off. This was an incredibly difficult year, really unusual year. Reasons of, COVID, working remotely, the amount of funding coming into the organisation, not only to support the COVID activities, PPE, etc., but also the capital spend. So that meant that for the first time, we became, because of the amount of our expenditure, a large financial trust for the reporting regimes, which means that we had an extra layer of audit scrutiny. It also meant that our materiality, which the auditors used to base their testing, reduced, which is a bit bizarre, but that's what it is. That meant that our materiality reduced to 6.9%. And bear with me if it appears that I'm labouring all this, but I think it's important to the board to note what's actually gone on in the background to where we're at the moment. So as you're all aware, we paid out a payment of in the form of a bond to secure the funding for the Boiler House project of 6.5 million during in the year to March 21. And this was to secure the funding and ensure that we had best value for money for so that the programme could carry on, because obviously there'd been some slippage during the year. And under the rules from the Department of Health and NHSIE, we had to show this as a fixed asset in our accounts. So when the auditors came in to do the annual audit, they look at the accounts on the basis of what the rules are from the NHSIE and Department of Health, but also from international accounting standards. The payment of the bond, by treating it as a capital item, didn't conform to international accounting standards. That suggests that it should be treated as a payment in advance and come off capital spend, which would have had huge implications for the trust, which the auditors are obviously aware of. So this caused a lot of conversations. The important thing to note is that NHSIE region and nationally were aware of the bond and the treatment of the bond. It's been used by a number of other organisations to secure funding in the capital spend of the last financial year, but it left the auditors in a difficult place. So where we are now is that we've agreed to disagree, so to speak. The auditors have raised the matter in our letter of representation, which is a letter stating out our position, signed by the Chief Exec, Aaron, and yourself, Mike, stating that for the reasons we've given, we believe that it is a capital item. And the auditors have issued now a clean audit report, so there's no qualification on the matter, which is great. It's been a very difficult time, and both our teams and the auditors have acted with great integrity and professionalism and honesty in getting to this position. So I think our thanks should go to all involved. There's been a number of changes to the figures along the last couple of months, and again I'd like to state that that is no reflection on the quality of the accounts prepared by Jane and the team. It's a matter of, because of the materiality, the size of the bond, things have had to change to keep within the materiality. The other thing that the auditors have pointed out is that whilst they've been reviewing the accounts and the going concern and the value for money consideration, they haven't, because of the evidence provided by Chris and the team, their understanding of the trust and the appreciation of that the trust has met its financial targets, they have not used their statutory instruments that they have available to notify the system about our financial position. But the caveat is that really we do now need to have robust plans that will start to deliver the trust back to financial balance. And Chris has discussed his plans with the auditors. So I think the message going forward for the next, particularly the next year, is we now have to actually bring some of those plans into fruition and make some big inroads into the deficit. So Chris, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Thanks, Liz. I'm not going to add to that. I thought that was a really comprehensive and good assessment of things, and from my perspective, simply just reinforcing the point, a very unusual financial year, very challenging process, and the team have come through it well, I think.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks for that update as well, Liz. My apologies if you see me keep going off camera and asking Aaron to chair. My nose is running a lot, but it's not anything related to an infection. I'm allergic to ethanol, so I've wiped my hands on an alcohol wipe, so my eyes and nose are running, so apologies for that. Aaron, over to you.
20 seconds, Chair, because I know we've only got 2 minutes left on the rest of the agenda. It's just a recognition that needs to be called out at board by me, and that's Chris's leadership. Having been with us for only a short period of months and managing something that ordinarily you would want quite a bit of corporate knowledge and understanding to position yourself around. And Chris, in short order, supported really well with Jane Stanley's leadership, have sailed us through what were quite choppy waters. People know my background, you know, finance is my kind of profession. Very, very impressed with not only how we've got here, but the way in which Chris led that process. So I just need that recognising, please, Chair.
We'll formally minute that, Aaron. Thank you very much. And if you could forward our thanks to everyone involved. Chris, deeply appreciated, you know that. We look forward to your paper in July. Okay, Liz, anything else you want to add on that? That's updated us on those issues. Then
no, I think that was quite enough for one committee to have dealt with. Thanks.
Okay, who's going to give us an update on finance then?
Chair, I was chairing it on Monday. I think all the issues have been covered today in the integrated performance report, Aaron's report, and the discussions we've had on financial balance and etc.
Thank you. Any questions there? No. Jill, over to you then for quality, please.
The May agenda is the May minutes are included, so I'd happy to answer any questions, and a lot of stuff has already been covered on today's agenda, and Hugh chaired the June meeting, so I don't know whether he wants to update something or take that at the next meeting.
Just one thing, Chair, to highlight is briefly mentioned is the bowel screening, pressures on the bowel screening programme, the concerns about capacity within it, bowel cancer screening programme, capacity due to forthcoming retirements, and also the extension of the screening programme nationally to include people over the age of 50. And we've asked, there's actions taking place about that. We've asked on the Quality Committee for another report to come to the autumn, to come to us in autumn to be updated on that, because there is a real risk regarding recruitment and capacity there for that programme.
Thank you. Noted, Hugh. Okay, colleagues, if there's no questions then for committee chairs, we'll move on to item 65. Colin, Head Governor's report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be fairly brief. It's all there, but I'd like to start off by paying tribute to somebody that's just left the Trust, if I may. Heidi Bowen, who was the Membership and Quality Coordinator, left the Trust on the 17th of June after 37 years with the Trust. Heidi's going to be joining Cancer Care as the area fundraiser. My personal relationship with Heidi goes back to 6 years I've been involved with the Trust. And Heidi has supported me as head governor and also as part of the membership and communications group, putting on the AGM annual members meetings on together, going out, talking to people in village halls, mothers unions, taking me all over the county when we were presenting on the NHS and governors. And I'd just like to say a big thank you for all her help and support that she's given us over the years, with the membership form that she's helped design with us. And I think she'll be missed. And it's just to say a big thank you from the Council of Governors also to Heidi. My next point really is, Mike, is as you and non-executive directors are fully aware that most of this month's been involved with appraisals of non-exec directors jointly with yourself and your appraisal, Mike, jointly with the Senior Independent Director. I didn't come away with a migraine, but it's very challenging doing appraisals when you're not actually in the workplace the way I've been used to, and it's been very rewarding to hear of some of the magnificent work that non-executive directors are doing and the sort of passion and compassion that they bring over to this trust. And I think we have an excellent non-executive director part of the board, but also an excellent board from my experience of doing the appraisals with the non-execs. One other thing I'd like to try and do is, on my report, I usually put down a lot of things that I as a head governor are doing and participate with deputy head governor and other governors, but other governors bring a lot of experience and expertise to the trust, and it's a very rich resource. So I've just taken out one thing from Amanda Carswell, who is one of our governors, and it's on page 161 of the pack. And I just look at what she's been doing. She's met with Ray Oliver, talking about expanding nature in Fenwich General Hospital inner courtyards. And I know one of our previous governors, Shanaz Asghar, did a lot with these inner courtyards and developing those. She's participated in a video of the big chat. She's been volunteering as a vaccinator, and she's campaigning for permanent free or heavily discounted car parking for oncology and chemo patients. She's donated a thermal imaging camera to oncology, which she did on behalf of her company. And she's also supplied 30 to 50 free wigs and head covers, scarves, sleep caps to oncology patients. There's a lot of governors out there that do an awful lot that network intimately with our communities. And this is just one example of one governor, and there are many more out there. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to all my fellow governors for the work that they put in. They are, after all, just volunteers. Thanks very much, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I think we would replicate that. You can see there's some hand clapping there from colleagues. Absolutely. To note in the board minutes, I understand from anecdotal discussions with other chairs that our governing body is used as a model in other trusts now. So it does reflect the professionalism and commitment of our governing body. So please pass our thanks to them. And thank you for the comments about the professionalism and the commitment of our NEDs as well. Any questions to Colin? No, thank you. The next item is the normal attendance monitoring. You've got that. Check with Paul as always do. Any urgent business, Paul?
I've not been notified of anything, Mike.
Okay, date and time of next venue, 28th of July at 10 o'clock. The next private board meeting, I'll close this meeting now, but the next private board meeting is due at 10:50, 11:50, sorry, I'm going to put it 11:55, just in case any of you got slow kettles or anything. So we'll reconvene on part 2 at 11:55. Okay.
Thanks, Jay. Well done. Thanks.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye now.